SABC.
Since the start of the lockdown, schools have been vandalized around the country.
4 schools in Soshanguve and nqwena have been torched.
Several schools in KwaZulu-Natal have now been vandalized. One in Bergville, a school they called Mbambani School, that was burnt down, torched.
Our schools are under attack. The future of our kids and the nation as a whole is also under attack.
Certainly a worrying issue. We're talking about provinces like Gauteng and Mpumalanga and the Northwest reporting similar instances of that.
Why people would actually go this far to take the education away from the children.
This is a battle against the future of the nation.
Police alone, government alone cannot win this battle. We need the support of our community, the neighbors.
I've received anguished calls from several healthcare workers, not only about the death of their co-worker, but about the conditions they're forced to work under at the Khayelitsha District Hospital.
They talk about us as heroes, frontline workers. We are not being treated as heroes from the inside. We are being treated as nothing.
The hospital is still operating as business as usual. They didn't call any companies to come and disinfect the place.
You don't have to close the whole hospital for the decontamination.
The communities of Mpenza and nqwena at Nqumbu in the Eastern Cape are at loggerheads following the murder of 4 young men. Their bodies were discovered by a passerby who alerted the community. It's believed that stock theft could be linked to these killings.
The bodies were discovered in grazing land at Mpenza, all shot through their upper bodies. The victims in their early 20s are from neighboring Luxeni village. There were 5 of them, and the survivor had to pretend to be dead when their assailants shot them execution style. Their families are heartbroken.
I'm very saddened about the passing of my brother's child. He was a humble and respectful child. He was just everything to us. He was schooling and was just here at home because of the lockdown. We are not happy about the brutal killing because we really do not know what crime he committed to be killed in such a gruesome manner.
Some residents are calling for the intervention of the army to calm the situation.
We need the intervention of the army to come and settle here in the village. Things are very bad here. Livestock thieves come at night and take our livestock. My neighbor's flock of sheep were stolen by heavily armed robbers. We do not sleep properly because of the violence in this village.
13 people from Benza village, including a headman, have been arrested. They will appear in court at Qumbu.
We are saying as the police that these arrests must serve as a lesson to those who are promoting acts of vigilantism within our communities. We are saying that mob justice remains a serious crime which is punishable by law.
Cases of stock theft are rife at Qumbu. In January this year, a small-scale farmer was brutally killed at his home, and a number of homesteads were set alight. Kululeko Nyembezi, SABC News, Qumbu in the Eastern Cape.
Arabile Gumede is standing by to deliver your market report. Arabile, it's over to you.
Yeah, good afternoon, Nompu. Look, it certainly has been an absolutely crazy week when it comes to the market picture itself. Across Asia, we saw an initial gain in that stock market, but unfortunately a plunge by the close of trade, so things aren't looking too good on that front. On the local boards, of course, following on from yesterday's negativity, we got a sense then that things weren't necessarily too good. Even though we expect a recovery coming up in the global economy, the question is, when does that happen? We, of course, haven't even gotten to a vaccine or even a cure for the coronavirus, so that still plays on the minds of investors as well. So that certainly is a key element to where the markets go. So the question does, though, rather should be asked as to whether the economy itself could be reflected through the stock market itself. Are things shaping out the same way? Should we be looking at the stock market as a way to determine the economy and how things will flow there? Perhaps not necessarily so. On the other hand, we do have a much better local currency, though, slightly better off after yesterday's 50 basis points cut by the South African Reserve Bank. But the key issue to note here, actually, was the two MPC members who voted perhaps for a lower interest rate cut than the 50 basis points that was actually put out in the end over there. So that tells you then that clearly things aren't necessarily as they should be, and this may actually be the end of that cutting cycle, if you want to call it that. We have cut interest rates by just this year alone 275 basis points. It more than halves, almost halves, should I say, the interest rates as they stood at the beginning of the year as well. So that tells you the kind of effort that the South African Reserve Bank has put in, and of course they've continuously been told that they aren't doing the justice or kind of the work that the economy needs. And now they're saying, well, look, we are trying to do what we can when the conditions are suitable for us to do so. Is 275 basis point cuts throughout the last four interest rates decisions enough? We'll never know until the end of the saga, hopefully, and we will then introspect and rather check in on things at that stage. For now, though, let's check in on this market movement and have a further discussion then. Warwick Lucas from Galileo Capital joins us as well this afternoon. Warwick, it certainly has been an interesting week. Things not necessarily going in one direction, but many different directions. The US, well, those markets seem to have been going off on one tangent, or almost a bull run of sorts, but falling short. On the local front, we're not really sure where things are going. What's moving markets right now?
Yes, good afternoon, Rabele. I think your question on whether the stock market is a reasonable indicator of the economy is actually a very pertinent one. And I think the answer to that is that it's a very poor indicator of the economy, quite frankly. I think the US market, we saw a lot of excitement there on the prospects of a potential vaccine. And then I think reality setting in, firstly in relation to trade war disputes rising up again. And the other factor, I think that the realization perhaps setting in that it's one thing to have a vaccine at phase one and quite another to actually have it available in pharmacies, and a long gap in between, and a lot of hurdles to be knocked over. And then turning to our local market, I mean, yes, the SARB did cut rates. I think one can debate the full effectiveness of what's been done there. I mean, on the one hand, we still have real interest rates, albeit that the gap is substantially closed. But of course, I mean, the economy is going to show a very severe contraction, which to me suggests that there is room in the short term for some cutting. But the economy projection, or GDP projection, I should say, by SARB of -7%, I mean, that suggests that there's actually a lot of negativity there to cut into.
Warwick, has the market perhaps just been betting on a recovery, a no holds barred, and sort of just had a enough is enough kind of approach now to this market picture?
Perhaps to some degree, but when we actually look at the composition of stock market indices, so let's take a JSE. I mean, a huge proportion is Naspers, which has benefited from lockdown and the remote working theme, as well as sale of video games. So that gives an example of distortion. A further example is in the US is the enormous tech stock companies. I mean, for possibly the first time in more than 20 years, 5 shares make up more than 20% of the S&P 500. Moreover, most of the US stock market is comprised of healthcare stocks and consumer staples. In fact, when you add those together with tech it adds up to north of 60% of US indices, whereas your cyclical stocks, financials, materials, and so on, suffering severe fall downs and not recovering yet.
Certainly some big movements on that front. The oil price then also worried. Initially, going all the way to around $35 a barrel or so, and we thought maybe there'd be a recovery in that oil price now as demand perhaps begins to pick up again. But unfortunately, another fall today, almost 5% at some stage going down for the oil price. What's shipping and shaping things on that front?
Okay, so that's very much a case of what has happened with supply as opposed to demand. Demand is taking some time to restore and will continue to take a long time to restore itself. Meanwhile, the OPEC Plus have shown some discipline in the cuts that they've made, which has brought some kind of a balance to the oil market. But I'm not sure that it's any kind of a bull situation for oil.
Does the rand get better from here on?
Well, the rand, I think, is firm in the wake of what is a relatively tight monetary policy there from SARB. So I think that's pretty much the rand voting on SARB's actions. So whether it actually gets better, I think, depends on our COVID response and reopening of the rest of the world economy.
Yeah, Warwick, appreciate the time. Thank you so much for it. Always great chatting to you on a Friday. Enjoy your weekend. Do stay safe. Also to you, South Africa, as well. Let's continue to just keep washing our hands. Stay persistent. Unfortunately, the virus is here to stay for some time, so let's try to keep ourselves as safe as possible. It's really great to have joined you as well then on this market sense. Do remember that a market positive picture is all we're aiming for, and hopefully that recovery will happen sooner rather than later. We do head off to a short break now. We'll be back with more news right after the short break. Do stay tuned to On Point. My name is Aramile Kumete, and that's where the buck stops.
Coming up on Stories Untold. When South Africans were put under strict lockdown regulations, these men and women rose to the occasion to serve. The spotlight is on our essential workers this Saturday at 5:30 p.m. on Stories Untold.
The fourth industrial revolution is here, and we should not waste time.
Governments are putting countries on lockdown to curb the spread of COVID-19. Local tech innovators are also doing their bit to help. Like this tap that you don't have to touch to turn on.
Our system, as soon as the foot force is off, it shuts closed totally.
Tech plays an important role again in how we keep ourselves informed.
We are getting on social media maybe for 5 hours.
And there's tech again for us to entertain ourselves as we are locked up in the house.
Instagram, Facebook. During this period, people will be focusing on workouts.
That's Network with me, Spumelele Zondi, every Sunday at 8:30 p.m.
CCMA offices around the country are closed as part of the national lockdown, but that hasn't stopped the flow of complaints from flooding in electronically.
I've literally lost all work.
Workers in the public sector, workers in the private sector, in this period need to ensure that their rights are protected.
The main devastation here is going to be economic devastation. Yes, the health issues are key and we must save our people, but we have to save jobs. We have to save the dignity of our people.
This is SME On Point. I'm Diabo Sito. Thank you so much for staying with SABC News. Life in the times of coronavirus has brought upon us a new normal, one where sanitizers are now a necessity. Our featured business of the week is a Johannesburg-based manufacturer called Intervent. They specialize in ventilation and cooling systems. They are now the makers of walk-through sanitizing booths. This is the story of Intervent, shot and edited by Mangoba Nkosi. According to Lisweu Rampa, the director at Intervent, business was good before Corona, and now it is even better.
Just from how our guys are thinking, how we are thinking, and how we've remodeled our business model has become much better because we've spotted the gaps in the quiet times and we've been able to maximize on those.
Sanitizing has become mandatory in terms of health and hygiene across the world. This outbreak is forcing the world to come up with fast and effective solutions. Intervent says this period found them ready to exploit the gaps in the market with the walk-through sanitizing booth. The company employs more than 30 people whose daily tasks include manufacturing these booths, among other products.
So because that's already a space that we are comfortable within, we understand, and it's a small now addition to our core products. If you listen to the minister when they spoke about 2 weeks ago, it's already gazetted that you need ventilation and adequate ventilation within any working environment where people are to reduce the viral load. So because we are already selling the solution for the COVID, and we've been doing it all over the years as our core business. We've been dealing with removing viruses, extracting air and producing clean air for our customers. The sanitization station is just an addition to a service offering that we already offer.
Although Rampa and his team have identified a gap in the market at a time when the survival of businesses is not guaranteed, he says they have not been immune to negative effects of COVID-19 in other aspects of the business.
Where we've suffered the most is customers not paying us on time. Contracts that we have had that we were picking up are now cancelled because customers have to hold on to their money,